Hey guys, welcome to a video, and this video is going to be about what I call the 5 stages of release. So in this video, it's going to help answer some questions you may have on how to release a golf club. Now, some people come to me, they want to know, should we hold it? Should we release it? Am I rolling it? Well, I'm going to answer those questions in this video, and I'm going to break down 5 key positions I look for in the release that'll make you a better golfer. I'm also going to talk about some of the common problems and some of the fixes that I see to help you with these positions. So enjoy the video. There's going to be a lot of detail, but hopefully it will answer those questions that you may have had on how to release that golf club. So part 1 of the video, I'm really going to talk about what I call these 5 stages of release. And really, if we look at the best players in the world, there's multiple different ways that they release that golf club. But inside of all that variability, I'd say there's a smaller variability amongst the best players and a wider variability amongst the poorest players. So I'm going to give you some kind of baselines that I'd look for. And let's start by talking about these 5 positions. So of these 5 positions, let me break them down. Position number 1 is as the golfer starts to downswing, it's when the left arm is at around a 10:30 position if we were to look at it on a clock. Position 2 is going to be the 9 o'clock position. Position 3 is going to be the 7:30 position. Position 4 is going to be when the shaft's parallel to the ground. And then finally, position 5 is going to be that point at impact. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This video is going to be purely focused on what the arms are doing and what the wrists are doing. So the body may come in a separate video, but this gives you some special attention on what the arms and wrists do. Now, if you use this video as a little bit of a workbook, what I would like you to do is look for the first point in which the golf swing doesn't meet these positions, these 5 simple checkpoints. And once you identify the one where you start to fail at, you can go back and continuously work on that position until you pass that checkpoint and then move on to the next one. Now, there are some golfers that would fail some of the checkpoints that I say, but they would reach the ball at impact in a pretty good delivery position. That may be very functional, it may be very good, but you might be leaving some of the power on the table and you don't hit the ball as far as you want. So you may find a golfer comes into impact with nice forward shaft lean, but it came in from a very wide position and it really lacks any power or height to the shot. So let's start. Workbook, checkpoint number 1. We're going to have a look at, if you're a traditional golf coach or a player, you might call this P4.5, but we're going to have a look at it when that left arm is at a 10:30 position. So now as this golf club comes down to that 10:30 position, what am I looking for? Well, compared to the backswing, which may have had or may not have had 90-degree angle between the left arm and the shaft, in this downswing, we're actually going to have created an acute angle. So this angle now is going to be less than 90 degrees. So from the front view, what you're going to be looking for is that lead wrist actually a little bit more hinged or radial deviation than it was in the backswing. Now in doing so, you might be worried, but don't worry too much, that the lead wrist is starting to cup a little bit more. It's quite a natural movement that as a golfer increases the hinge, the lead wrist starts to cup. Just beware of that. Don't be scared of that. And in this transition, we're actually also increasing the amount of extension or cupping in the right wrist. So transition from the front point, we've got an acute angle, a little bit more cup in the right wrist, and we're well on our way to a better downswing. Now, one of the biggest problems I would see, the golfer starts down and they already start to make this position too wide. It's going to be very, very difficult to create power from that position. And it's also making the swing wider, you're more likely to hit the ground behind the ball. Now, you would probably not associate this, but if you get too wide in the downswing too early, you may be a terrible bunker player. So a lot of golfers I see who really struggle with the bunkers get too wide too early, causing them to hit the ground behind the ball. Thin, top, difficult to getting the ball out of the sand. Sometimes this just comes from the early part of the downswing. So if you're a weak bunker player, maybe you've got a weaker release. Now, what we may also notice is in the downswing, the elbows have squeezed a little bit more together than they were in the backswing. So we may have some separation of the elbows in the backswing, but they start to close in the downswing. That's also helping us increase that wrist position as we come down too. So first stage, acute angle. So now you've mastered stage 1 into stage 2. So stage 2 traditionally would be position 5, or we can call it the 9 o'clock position. And again, we're looking to have kept an acute angle by this point. Now, you could possibly have gone a little bit wider here, and you may not be at 90 degrees. You could still hit a good ball, but going from a wide position to impact is going to lack power. especially if you're not the strongest of golfers. So that extra wrist angle can help to create speed, but by making it wide, we're leaving a lot of potential power on the table. So what we're doing, we've gone from this acute angle and we're maintaining that acute angle. However, by this point, what's starting to happen is we are now slightly flattening the lead wrist, and that's going to help the club face close a little bit more relative to the target. So we're not keeping the face open, we are trying to flatten the wrist slightly as we get into this 9 o'clock. You would also note that the trail wrist is remaining extended. Now, one of the most common problems that I see, and it may be because of people like me on YouTube, but they've been trying to shallow the golf club too much. And by dropping the shaft behind them, now the golf club is more prone to hitting the ground behind the ball and the swing direction going too far to the right. It can make it very difficult. So as we approach into stage 2, so traditionally you may call this P5, or you could call it a 9 o'clock position. What I would be looking for is, by this point, the wrist is still creating an acute angle between the lead arm and the shaft, and the trail wrist is still remaining flexed at this point, so we're not extending that lead wrist. We would actually be trying to increase the amount that the lead wrist starts to flex. So once we've gone from this 10:30 to 9 o'clock position, we are actually trying to flatten that left wrist a little bit more to reduce the amount that the club face would be open as we come down. We'll also have a feeling that as we come down, that right elbow starts to squeeze a little bit closer to the left too. So we're still maintaining the wrist angle. This is going to help us create power. And you could hit the ball well if you got wide, there's no doubt about it, but you would be leaving power on the table, and for a shorter hitter, that's probably not the best way to play golf. Now, I'd also say at this point in the downswing, we're not trying to steepen or shallow the shaft, which leads us nicely into the common mistakes I see. Number one would be the shaft would be at 90 degrees or more from the lead arm. We're trying to keep this as an acute angle at this point. So if the golf swing's too wide, stop there, go do some practice swings and try and change this piece. Common problem number 2, and this is sometimes people who are guilty of watching a little bit too much online golf, and that would be this attempt to shallow the golf club too much in the transition. And what golfers often forget is when they shallow the golf club, they're moving the low point more backwards, and it's making it more likely they hit the ground behind the ball, as well as swinging more to the right, which that may be desirable for some golfers, but just a warning, you might start to misstrike your irons when you do that. So stage 2. Now, stage 1, stage 2 drill that I really like for golfers is if you're having trouble creating this checkpoint here, the feeling will be that as you go back, you half the distance between the shaft and the shoulder in transition. So quite often this is called float loading, but that feeling of increasing the angle. Now, lag, if it's done excessively, can be problematic too. But we're just trying to make sure that we come down a little bit narrower. If you struggle with this move a lot, and it's something that you've had technically an early release for a long time, do this drill to the extreme. Feel like you come down and you leave the golf club on your shoulders as you come down. It's a really extreme feeling, but it'll help you get that feeling of keeping an angle that's less than 90 degrees in the start of the downswing. And that'll be really helpful in trying to produce the positions we're looking for. Another way you can do this is get close to a wall, and with that wall behind you, let me use stickers and CGI for this one, but you'd put the wall behind you and set the 90-degree angle at address, swing to the top, and then practice to come down but not hit the wall. Now, when you do this, my advice, try and feel like you swing to the right at the same time, because many people, to cheat not hitting the wall, will go over the top. So we don't want to create a new problem, but set that golf club, have a wall behind you, give yourself a little bit of room. Don't use your best golf clubs. Swing to the top, pull down. Get into a habit. Now, in reality, once you've got that wrist movement in there, what we're trying to do is time the movement of the arms and the wrist. So many golfers will not move the arms quick enough, but then start to unload the wrist, whereas the better players will have the arms move for longer before the wrists really start to unload. I think that's a good way for you to visually see it, that you need the arms to move faster and the wrist to work later. Arms move faster, wrists work later. If you've got this, well done so far. We're moving on to stage 3. And now we're on stage 3. Many golfers can get stage 1 or stage 2 correct, but stage 3 is a tricky piece. So stage 3 is where I'd say the arm is at a 730 position. Now for me, visually, face on camera, you're looking for that lead arm to be creating around a 90-degree angle between the left arm and the golf shaft. So we're at this position here. And now what we're really being aware of is, where is the left wrist? So the left wrist should start to be a little bit flatter. And by going from that maximum cupped position to a flatter position, we actually lose some of that hinge or radial deviation. So now we've got around a 90-degree angle. Now we've got plenty of speed from here to create power as we come into the golf shot. Have you ever been behind a bush and you have to kind of reset your backswing and you can only hit the ball from there, but you can create great speed? That's because we're loaded and unloading that wrist position, which is very significant to the speed we create. But going back to that position, we're going to be at this 730 position. We're going to have around a 90-degree angle and the lead wrist is going to be nearer to flat. Now, honestly, there's some variability on this. And when I say that, the lead wrist flat is a good indication, but it depends on how you grip the golf club at the beginning. If you're somebody with a stronger grip, maybe a player like Zach Johnson, you may come down and have a little bit of cupping in that wrist. That'll give you the conditions you need to hit the ball where you want for a stronger grip player. If you're somebody like Colin Morikawa with a weaker grip in the left hand, you may need to bow that lead wrist a little bit more too. But the general indication, when we're looking at it from the front view, we're looking at a 90-degree angle. Now, if you were a golfer and you start with a grip that is more towards the target with maybe only one knuckle showing, it actually becomes a lot harder for you to create some of these wrist angles we're talking about in this video. That is why generally I'd prefer a golfer with a slightly stronger grip with the left hand more on top, because it gives you a little bit more range of movement to create some of these positions in the downswing too. Now, if you've reached this position, you're doing great. I would say of those lessons that I do, the 75% that include the release, well, now maybe 80% of those fail at this point. So especially amongst higher handicappers, they tend to get into this position here and they're already starting to lose that wrist position. So they've been great, wide. So you need some kind of drill to improve this. Now, sad news, I spent around 2 years working on my release. I'd had a lot of good coaches show me what I needed to do and explain it to me, but I never really got the results I wanted. Being around TrackMan, being around GC Quad, I managed to learn that launch angle was important. At the beginning, I felt I hit the ball quite far, but looking back at old data, I was launching my 7-iron 21 degrees, and I was coming into impact with my hand position back. So take yourself an impact bag and place it behind the ball. Now, you need to find how far this bag's going to go. But you put the ball out in front, and what you'd practice is use the ball as a reference point. It's just standing to the side, setting the wrist position, pulling it up, and practicing coming down. And if you lose that wrist position, you're going to be so wide, you're going to catch the bag. But if you manage to maintain that wrist position, you'll find it quite easy to hit the ground ahead of the ball and not throw that wrist out too soon. So take yourself an impact bag. This is going to help you feel that you're keeping the hinge. And this is going to be very good at getting you from stage 1, stage 2, and to stage 3. Now, some of the common problems that I do see at this area would be the right arm is straightening too quickly in the wrong direction. So if we start to see that the right arm straightens outwards, it's making the swing too wide, and that is going to make it very likely that we hit that bag. So one drill that you could do to help you improve this stage 3 would be the feeling that you keep the right arm flexed completely. So you feel like you never straighten that right arm. Now, if you do that, you'll never hit the ground. You will need to straighten the right arm, but we're going to do it later. So we'll go back, we'll feel the right arm's bent, we'll delay it, and we take some practice swings just keeping that right arm bent. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Now, this drill of keeping the right arm bent is actually really good for fixing early extension as well. Because when a golfer extends the right arm too quickly, the golf swing gets too wide, and early extension is a way to lift the body off the ground and get that golf club from digging in the ground too much. So what you might find, this is a fun one, that by keeping your right arm bent for longer, your turns increase, your forward bend increases, and you actually look a whole lot more professional when you hit that ball. On to stage 4. This is a hard one. So I'd typically call this delivery position. So stage 4 for traditionalists out there is position 6 in the golf swing. And this is when the shaft is parallel to the ground. Now, some of the checkpoints I have at position 6 would be Where is the end of the golf club? So for a better player, they're typically going to have the end of the golf club somewhere near to the back of the ball, and they're going to have their hand somewhere near to the right leg. Now this changes if it's somebody who has a lot of hip sway, maybe even an exaggerated amount of hip turn, but that end of the golf club is going to be pretty close to the ball. So at position 6, we are starting to pull the arm down longer. We are keeping that wrist position. The end of the golf club is going to be pretty close to the ball, and the hand should be somewhere near to the right leg. Now we're going to go a little bit more. We're going to look at the lead wrist being a little bit flatter, maybe completely flat by this position. And the club face, if you were checking again, would be somewhere between 12 and 1 o'clock if we were to look at the leading edge of the golf club. You've got some checkpoints to go check out. This is what I'm looking at in every golf lesson when I'm looking at the release. How are we doing on these? So now we've looked at the club, now we've looked at the amount of hinge we have in the wrist. Now we have a look at the flex in the wrist. But what about from the down the line view? Well, I'm also looking at the sweet spot of the club being close to the hands, in line, or slightly behind. Poorer golfers, in a way to move the low point more forward, will typically go a little bit outside, shifting their swing more left, making it easier to strike the ground ahead of the ball. So that's the checkpoint that we've got, is the club in line with the arm. And then, let's go a level further, where's the left arm? So my indication on this one would be when the golf club is at position 6, the club's in line with the hands, the left arm would be somewhere in between the ball and the feet. My preference would be a little bit nearer to the feet than it would be to the ball. Why is this important? If the arm is too far away from the body, how do you get the sweet spot onto the ball? You'd have to raise the handle this way, making the shaft very vertical, and you'd have to rotate the arm a lot more to create that closing of the face. And when the left arm and the golf club are in line, it rotates really easily, which might not be the best for direction control. Now, if we get a golfer who's got the left arm in, guess what they can do? Well, they can allow the lead arm to rotate more, and that rotation is adding speed. So if you're a more technical golfer or a student of the game, you may have read Golfing Machine. Well, this would be unloading power accumulator number 3. It creates speed. But if the left arm is away from the body, doing that would create a shank shot. And that's also one of the problems. The arm being too far away from the body will lend itself to more heel shots. So let's just say, maybe a dream world, we've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and we're pretty close to stage 4. I'm just going to say, be patient, bear with it. This part is hard. Learning to hit balls, not just practice swings, with that bag behind the ball, is going to help you take stage 1 to stage 4 and making it functional. Now, if I were using an impact bag like this, I might take the club and I'd go from the ferrule to the end of the grip, and I'd place the ball just inside of that. If I get too wide, that shot's going to be quite difficult. Let me just move that back. So somewhere around here. Now, if you do this and you find, you know what, I look on video, because you're going to need to use video a lot. I look on video and I'm not quite getting the release right, make it harder. If it's too extreme and you've got this position way beyond the left leg, make it a bit easier. So I'm going to come down, start here, half shot, and then I would look on the video and go, okay, how's my position 6 or my stage 4? Are my hands near my right leg? Is the end of the golf club on the ball? Is my arm close to my body? Is my club face relevant? It'd be a good checkpoint for you. It's a lot of work, but you're watching this video because you're trying to find information on how to release the golf club. And then finally, we come to stage 5, or impact, position 7, the moment of truth, whatever you may call it. And that's the point when the club's touching the ball. Now, my reference point on this one would be the lead forearm. Not the lead arm, but the lead forearm is ahead of the ball. And depending on the build or the size of the golfer, the taller that lead arm may be a little bit more ahead. If you're a junior, it may just be slightly ahead. So I mean, if I'm measuring this in centimeters, we might have that left arm 8 to 9 centimeters ahead of the ball. If you're a junior, smaller arms, that might be 3 or 4 centimeters ahead of the ball. But we're trying to have that left arm ahead of the ball at impact. And in doing so, that would allow us to have forward shaft lean. If the golf club is behind that left forearm, the face would be more open. So typically, when you look at data from hack motion, the lead wrist would tend to be 10 degrees more bowed by impact than it would be at address. And in doing so, you'd see the club face starts to open. So now we've got the lead arm ahead. We've got the hands leading the golf club. The club face is a little bit open. So what's that going to make happen? The ball's going to go to the right. So what does that mean? Well, now it actually means that we need to have some amount of lead arm rotation. Don't be scared of it. I'm not asking you to roll the golf club, which for me would be when the club head travels too far out to the right. But I'm still getting you to get your hands to trace a circle around the body, but we're allowing that lead arm to rotate a little bit more. And that lead arm rotation is going to create a lot of speed. And it will influence the direction. It'll help the ball go a little bit more left because you need that now that the hands are forward and the face is naturally a little bit more to the right. We're going to need to increase the amount of rotation in that lead arm. Now, if I were looking for a ballpark figure, 5 to 10 degrees of arm rotation from address to impact is good. How do you see that on video? Difficult. You could use hack motion. It measures the rotation. That does help. Or what we could also look at is at impact that the left arm is not more visible than it was at address. We don't want to see a big gap between the left and right arm, because if we do that, what happened to the face there? It pointed more to the right. So what would you do as a golfer if you come in with the left arm on top and the right arm under? Well, typically you would cup the wrist too much and then you're hitting the ground behind the ball, thinning the ball, hitting the ball too high, losing the distance. So again, hands are going to lead the shot. There is going to be some arm rotation, and that's natural. Don't be scared of it. We need to find a way to square the face now that we've got more forward shaft lean than we started with at address. So once again, at impact, stage 5 in our workbook, the hands are ahead, the right elbow is going to be slightly bent, and the left arm's not going to be visible from the down the line view. It's going to have disappeared to allow that club face to be square and the ball to go where we want. I do understand there's a million ways you could hit a golf ball. There's a million ways you could release. I'm just describing one. There are golfers out there on tour with the arm further from their body, and there are golfers with the arm very close. Sergio Garcia would have the closest arm that I can recall. Dustin Johnson would have the furthest away. Now, some of the common problems we will see at impact, it would be lead wrist extending too quickly. My favorite drill for this one would be to get a launch monitor, try and get your launch angle less than 50% of the loft of the club. Go online, double check what the loft of your club is, and then try to hit some short shots, hitting the ball as low as you can. You're learning to keep the right wrist extended and the hands ahead to hit the ball very low. Another problem we may see is excessive raising or lowering of the shaft, creating heel and toe contacts. This one's a little bit more difficult to manage, and one that I feel that you would probably need more professional help with, understanding if you're doing too much or too little. Another common problem would be seeing that the right arm is too straight too early, and then that would help if you go back to the drill of keeping the right arm bent for as long as possible. Final takeaways on this video: your release dictates power, direction, contact, and also just reduce the risk of injury. I would say any drills that you try, do them softly. If you start to hear that you're hitting the ground too aggressively, don't do that for an extended period of time. You'll start to hurt yourself. But I would like to say that I'd start a lot of golfers off on the release and trying to teach them how to hit the ball from halfway back to halfway through to build good fundamental release, to then extend that out into a longer swing. Now, a common question I get is, how do I fit what I've learned into a full swing? I'd quite often say, well, what I would want you to do is work on that release and then gradually make it longer and longer until you start to see the results you're expecting and the result hits the checkpoints. Follow the workbook, follow the stages, see if you can hit them, and if you do, you'll have success out on the golf course. All right, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. There's been some good content in there. Do the usuals, like, comment, subscribe. Any questions, please put them in the comments. And happy golfing. Find the fairways and have a great day.